Let's go ahead and get back in our seats and get moving with this. I know we have a number of folks that have to be somewhere else. All right, welcome to the work session. Excuse me. Call to order. You don't need to be up here, do you?
I can be down there, yeah.
All right, let's go ahead and get started. We have with us, the subject is the Sustainable Business Park resolutions that are contemplated to be before us yet this year. So we've asked Dar and Steve to start with the presentation. And after, I think, at some point, we're going to transition over to Al to address us as well. So we'll turn it over to you guys.
Good morning, Commissioners. Appreciate your time this morning. I wanted to just point out a few people that are with us today that have been assisting throughout the path that we've been on for a number of years. Turn this way. Kim Williams is our finance director. I think I mentioned before, they asked me the number, and then they asked her the number because they trust her number better than mine. Nick Vanderveen, our deputy director, he makes sure that the doors roll up every morning and that the trucks are rolling and the front end loaders move thousands of tons of trash every day. And then, of course, Steve, you know as well, and then Dan DeWitt, he's from Warner Norcross. He's been assisting us on the legal side as far as looking at the ordinance, and he wrote the original one and assisted us with redrafting with the assistance of Linda Howell from Corporate Counsel. We have a presentation today to help guide the conversation. As Chair Steck mentioned, it'll be a tag team between me, Steve, and Al as we walk through. When I became director 10 years ago, that was 2015, so it'll be 10 years here in December, I had the great pleasure of actually having either worked with or met with each of the previous directors of Public Works all the way back to the beginning of the department. The department actually was formed, I believe, in '62. Our department was asked by the Board of Commissioners in around '68 to step into this space because there was a tremendous issue of lack of disposal space and open dumps throughout the county that needed to be addressed. One of the other things that I did when I became director, that year prior, Doug Wood, who was my boss at that time, really gave me the opportunity to get a really good sense of where the department was and where we were going. But when I became director, we had these rolling file cabinets that we now have all digitized. And I went back and found all the bound books of the minutes going all the way back to basically the beginning of our department. And I did that for a very intentional purpose because I knew where we were. I understood some of what we had done, but I wanted to understand the genesis of why. And what we also found were notes from then Commissioner Vern Ehlers, along with a lot of other documents that helped us understand and shape where we came from and the reasons why we made a lot of the decisions that we did. Honestly, today we're at a 40-year crossroad. Our department has been in the business over 50 years of managing municipal solid waste in this county. Vern Ehlers and many around him were struggling at that time with how do we manage municipal solid waste in a safe way to ensure that businesses and residents in Kent County are cared for in that space. And he had also gone through a very difficult siting of the South Kent landfill. And those that were there then and those that recall that, along with the siting of the North Kent landfill prior to that, those are not easy decisions. It's very difficult to put a facility like that in someone's backyard. But those were the reasons why the vision was cast that not only were we going to manage municipal solid waste through landfill operations, we were going to be much more proactive and strategic in our decisions going down the road. So to look at that a little closer, Commissioner Ehlers and the team that was around him at that time The decision to move forward with the waste-to-energy facility was actually a 15-year process. It started in the 1970s and culminated in a decision in 1985 to construct the waste-to-energy facility that's located on Market in the city of Grand Rapids, and that facility came online in 1990. And it's been operating for the last 34 years. Along with that, and those of us that are a little long in the tooth will remember this, there was a nonprofit company called Recycle Unlimited that was a genesis of recycling for residents in Kent County. And they had drop-off stations, and I used the one behind the D&W in Granville when that was still a D&W, and that was in the 70s. And at a point in time, Recycle Unlimited realized that the project and the problem was larger than what they could handle. And so we were asked as a department in 1990 to take over the recycling operation, and we did so. Along with the opening of the South Kent landfill, we recognized that haulers used to use the North Kent landfill, and the distance of travel between where they used to tip and the South Kent landfill, which is on the southern side of the county for a reason, kind of out of the way and kind of out of mind, was that we wanted to bring equity and service to make sure that a hauler, no matter where they were tipping, had a facility to go to. So we developed the strategy of northern, central, and southern Kent County to make sure that we were providing services across with our fleet of facilities to ensure haulers had a place to tip. Our original North Kent transfer station was doubled in size within 10 years of its original construction. And in this past summer, we built an entirely new North Kent transfer station that's triple the size of the double of the size because of the growing need across the county, including northern Kent County. So along with that, when I stepped into this space in 2015, I'm 30-some years kind of into this industry, we recognized that there were a couple of really important decisions that we had to make. Thinking about it was 15 years of roadway that we needed, runway, to make a decision around waste to energy, and that is, how do we continue to be financially viable without a landfill? Because the South Kent landfill was going to be closing in 2030, roughly. How do we brace the community for that change? Because we also recognize that landfilling was a solution and a technology, but it wasn't the one that we should look forward to in the future for a number of reasons. One is liability. Two is the impact to the community, among many other reasons why landfilling is no longer or should no longer be the preferred method of disposal. And then how do we make it more equitable across the county? We deliver services across the country, I wish. We deliver services across the county. We have over 800 truck deliveries a day. Trucks are delivering municipal solid waste and recycling, north, central, and south. Part of our service areas and free market, if you will, and but 2/3 of our service area is in what's called flow control. And there's been this ongoing tension between the two, and that's what we've been trying to solve to. When we looked at what's been happening in the industry, particularly in Kent County, when another light bulb went on recently when Chair Steck and County Administrator Vandenberg at the State of the County address had mentioned we've increased by population by 100,000 residents since 2000. That began to provide some additional perspective as to what you're seeing on this chart. And that is, for a long time, the goals of Commissioner Ehlers and the goals of our department were to minimize landfill disposal, increase recycling and diversion. And someday, as Vern said, only 20% of what we have would be going to landfill and the rest would be recycled. And then our economy took off and people discovered Kent County in a whole new way. And with 100,000 more residents and all the businesses and everything that has created this economic opportunity and engine, you can see in the chart that our landfilling almost went vertical. So we recognize that not only were we solving to an immediate solution, we had to be thinking long-term, which is what we do, For example, I and the previous two directors spent the last 25 years purchasing property for the intent purpose of building another landfill because we knew someday that would occur. So our fleet of facilities today, we have two closed landfills that the county took over in the 60s and closed. They weren't really landfills, they were dumps, they were quasi landfills. We continue to manage those today because of what was placed in them and the condition, and we've taken the financial and the legal liability to make sure that those facilities are managed well. We opened our own North Kent landfill, and that is now closed. The balance of our fleet of facilities is the North Kent Transfer Station. We have our Recycling and Education Center. We have our administrative offices where we offer SafeChem collections in 5 different locations in the county. We have our South Kent landfill on the south side. We also have our waste-to-energy facility. And in our minds, the recycling facility and the waste-to-energy facility are our flagship facilities. They're all constructed along the 131 corridor because most of us that kind of have seen the population growth, most of that growth has occurred along that corridor over the years. This is our simplified chart, which I'll say is more complicated than simple. But the two things I want you to look at, and that is the green. 25% of the diversion that we have in this county is because of the waste-to-energy facility, and that's diversion away from landfill. The other 4% is because we operate our Recycling and Education Center. 600,000 tons of municipal solid waste, what you and I put in our trash cart, what the typical business puts in their dumpster behind the building, is municipal solid waste. And without waste-to-energy and without the recycling facility, there's virtually no diversion of municipal solid waste in Kent County. Our frustration, and my frustration personally, is that we would like to see the recycling rate increase significantly, but we've been stagnated and stuck there for years. We can't seem to get past a 25% participation rate as it stands today. So in all the conversation around flow control and what that means is the only thing that we're focusing on is what we handle today. And that circle there, which is 120,000 tons that leaves our system, that if it stayed in our system, we could plan around a future for our facilities and the diversion of that from landfill so that we wouldn't have to construct another landfill, nor would we have to look to other communities to take on that burden for us. So why flow control? The simple math is that landfilling is cheaper than virtually any other option that we can offer. Our Recycling and Education Center, where we accept recyclables, costs more to operate, and we have to charge a higher fee than if we buried it in the ground. To operate our waste-to-energy facility is more expensive because of the capital costs and operating costs of burying it in the ground. Our South Kent landfill, as kind of crazy as it sounds, even though we always saw the landfill as a resource to use long-term, but to minimize its use, actually supports the cost of all of our other operations. North Kent Transfer Station does not stand up on its own financially, even though we charge the same tip fee there as we do South Kent, right? That balance, that equity, without contribution from landfill revenue. Waste-to-energy today does not stand up on its own, but it receives $1 million a year in revenue from the waste-to-energy facility, from the South Kent landfill to help reduce the cost of waste-to-energy and build some equity around that between South Kent, North Kent, and the waste-to-energy facility. Our recycling center, we contribute $20 per ton to the on the recycling side. What we should be charging is $90 a ton. We charge $70 because we're offsetting the cost of that operation from revenue from the South Kent landfill. We're wrapping up $45 million of refurbishment at the waste-to-energy facility. It's a power plant. At the end of the day, most of those power plants have a 50-year lifespan. We're 34 years in. These refurbishments are just a natural part of CapEx and capital improvement projects. The best way I describe it is we built that in the 80s with 70s technology. We're upgrading and improving and replacing components that are just at the end of their life after 34 years of operation. That facility can divert another 3 million tons from now until 2039 if we choose to close it at that date. The other thing that we're looking at, of course, is the contracts that made waste to energy possible, that Commissioner Ehlers and all the other commissioners in the city of Grand Rapids and all the other cities participated in, expire at the end of next year. So we will lose our flow control and the support that that facility needs for 2/3 of our population if and when, or not if, but when that facility and its contracts with the 6 cities and the flow control that's there expires. I'm going to transition now to Steve. He's going to walk you through some of those details of flow control, and I believe Al, and then I'll step back in a few minutes.
Good morning, everyone. I'll just give you a quick overview. Many of you have seen this before. So when we talk about flow control, what we're really talking about is a countywide ordinance that requires waste haulers that collect municipal solid waste within the county border to bring that to a designated county facility. As we mentioned before, the waste energy facility has been supported by flow control for over 30 years. That's been a very successful program. And really, as Dar mentioned, the main diversion technology that we have in our community and want to continue to support moving forward. Flow control at its heart does not favor one hauler over another. Every hauler will pay the same tip fee regardless of which facility they deliver to, whether that's North Kent, South Kent, or the waste energy facility, and it guarantees equal access to those facilities. So we like to say it creates a level playing field for everyone. The Board of Public Works will continue to approve their annual tip fee rate as they do today. So every October, the Board of Public Works looks at all the operating expenses, revenues, and says, okay, we have to look at what the tip fee for bringing municipal solid waste to our facility needs to be. That will continue on through this process. And again, it only includes municipal solid waste. So any other source separated material is not flow controlled. So recycling is not flow controlled. Organic source separated organic material is not flow controlled. Construction and demolition waste, industrial waste, yard waste, that still is a market driven value. It can go to any facility, including ours, but it can also immediately flow out of the community as well. So we're really talking about a portion of all the waste generated within Kent County. So again, relates to MSW, doesn't relate to the source separated material. This has been our approach to updating the flow control ordinance. So it apply to the whole county and have rate equity across the county instead of a piecemeal approach where certain communities are paying more because they have certain disposal options. It's enforceable and consistent, so similar to how flow control works today. The DPW has that ability to license haulers or not license haulers, has the ability to make sure that those trucks collecting MSW are delivering it to one of our facilities. So then it also avoids confusion because there's not sort of a magic municipal line that somebody is in or isn't when they're collecting trash. And ultimately, it provides the long-term assurances needed for future financing contracts, agreements. So, you know, you all understand the longevity of some of these larger projects. We're talking 20 years, 30 years, in the case of waste energy, 40 years. It gives you a timeline and a future that you can leverage when you're developing private partnerships or if you're bonding. Flow control is consistent with the state's new Public Act 115, which is really the materials management plan and legislation. It does incentivize recycling and organic source separation because those materials are not included in flow control. It means that there's markets that really get developed around recycling and organic separation because you can reduce maybe your costs for disposing of MSW by moving that material out of your trash. It maintains the county authority and charge to protect the environment and public health, which is ultimately why the DPW exists. And then, as I mentioned, the Board of Public Works would be responsible for setting any future system-wide tip fees, and we'll talk briefly, the other action item that will come before you is the governance structure. So again, just further on the approach, last summer, the Board of Public Works in July did approve the flow control ordinance to come forward to the board. That has not been changed since that time. What the flow control ordinance was not specific to the Kent County Bioenergy Facility. It really was an overall ordinance that would help support the overall department and that integrated system. So again, it ensures that we maintain sufficient feedstock for waste energy after 2025 when those contracts expire with the 6 cities, and it generates the revenue that we need to have in order to continue to support waste diversion and our other programs. It ensures tipping fee rate equity in Kent County so that everyone pays the same tip fee. That doesn't mean everybody has the same trash bill. There are other factors that contribute to how much you pay for disposal, but the tip fee would be the same regardless of where you live in the county, and therefore everyone in the county is supporting county-owned facilities and our diversion. It defines the type of material, again, as municipal solid waste, and it outlines a process for exemptions, and those exemptions can happen by a material type, it can happen by a location, it can happen by a customer. Currently at Waste Energy, we have 200 exemptions, over 200 exemptions, where we say to that customer or that hauler, this material really isn't something that falls underneath this, you can take that elsewhere. And then it will ultimately set an effective date and a compliance date. So even if this is approved by the end of the year, it wouldn't take effect until a future date. So cost estimates, kind of back of envelope. Currently at our facilities, if you deliver to North Kent or South Kent, that's roughly $55 a ton for MSW. If you deliver to Waste Energy, you're paying roughly $75 a ton for MSW. If that material is going out of the county, it can be paying anywhere from $30 to $45 a ton for that material. So if you think that an average household generates about a ton of material, and we estimate we could be anywhere from a $60 to $65 per ton tip fee for this, you're looking at some different changes in what potentially people would pay on their trash bill. So for some of the outlying areas, you might see an increase of $1.66. If you're in a community like a Plainfield or areas like Byron Center or Gaines, where that material is probably already flowing to one of our facilities, you might see roughly $1 increase a month on your trash bill. If you're anywhere in the Metro 6, you'd likely see a reduction because you've been paying more for that material to go to Waste Energy. So anyone in the 6 cities would actually see a reduction. Whether that translates to you actually having a bill that goes down is another factor. We don't control that. All we control is the tip fee. And so I wouldn't expect an 83 cents rebate coming back to you if this comes through, but it does again create equity so that wherever you live in the county, you're contributing equitably to the county facilities and everything that we're doing. And again, the tip fee plus transportation plus capital and labor, all of that goes in, and profit, all goes into what you pay for disposal. So where would we be going if we move forward with countywide flow control? Kind of what does the next 5 years look like? So what we would envision is continuing down this road that we've been on, as Dar said, for 40 years, looking at how to make sure that we're investing in technology that can help us divert more material from landfill. So many of you were at the North Kent Transfer Station ribbon cutting. You can see we've now repurposed the old transfer station into a recycling drop-off center to make that more convenient. We're now actually allowing commercial haulers to bring recyclable material to that facility so that hopefully it provides more access to recycling in the northern part of Kent County. We're adding an organics drop-off. We're adding polystyrene foam densification. We have our charm center. we're trying to invest in more and more of that source-separated work so that things get pulled out before it gets tipped on the tip floor and then moved to a landfill. There's new pre-processing technology to pull out more of that organic material, recyclable material from trash. So as we move forward, we'd be able to make more investments in those sorts of technologies at that location. The Recycling and Education Center would continue to be supported. So as Dar mentioned, we do backstop that facility because as you know, commodity values go up and down, and that facility has good years and bad years, and we try and create a very stable system so that, again, everyone in Kent County has a place for their recycling to be processed. The waste energy facility would continue to stand up. As Dar mentioned, we'd be able to process another 3 million tons of material. We also have magnets there, and then we recently installed an eddy current so that we're pulling out both ferrous and non-ferrous metal from that facility. But again, we can focus on adding more pre-processing. Too much cardboard and too much plastic is going into waste energy. We need to be trying to pull that material out before it goes into that facility. But in order to do that, we really need this pre-processing technology. And then finally, we would continue to move forward with the closure of South Kent landfill, but we would be looking at developing a new South Kent transfer station at that facility so that there is continued disposal option on the southern part of Kent County for commercial haulers, as well as for residents, contractors, others that use our system, but don't necessarily use a specific hauler. So this makes sure that residents in northern Kent County and southern Kent County continue to have a disposal option and recycling drop-off options. And then ideally, we'd also spend the next few years looking at the area around Lowell. There is some data that would show that that area may need another transfer station because it's not currently served. So looking at, again, how does Kent County continue to play a role in providing disposal for folks, but also continuing our investment in waste diversion. Oops, wrong way. Hey, this is really small on the screen. What this is, so this kind of outlines what the steps are in this next couple years. So at the very top, Q4 of this year, if the flow control ordinance is approved as well as the governance structure, then we would really be spending 2025 working with the community to plan implementation for that. So there's a lot of things to still figure out. As I mentioned, there's the exemption process, there's going to be rerouting, there's going to be movement of material in different ways than they are today. And so really working to plan that out, make sure that when we set that compliance and effective date, that we're able to implement and that everybody really knows what is to happen. Then the new ordinance would potentially go into effect in Q1 of 2026. So a year from now-ish would be when that ordinance would go into effect and when there would be a requirement that MSW goes to one of our facilities. We'd continue the refurbishment of waste energy. That $45 million worth of investment is continuing to go forward until the end of 2026. We're also beginning the materials management planning process that the state has required that we go to that shows how is our community going to effectively double our recycling rate. So going from roughly 16 to 17% recycling to 30% minimum. And so there's still a lot of planning to figure out what is this pre-processing, what's the future of the recycling center, what's the future of a lot of our facilities in order to continue to meet that goal. That planning process and the approval of that plan needs to be wrapped up by the end of 2027. We would begin the work on, instead of pulling a permit for a new landfill, beginning to build out some of the initial infrastructure on the property that we own to the south of South Kent landfill. Also, we've called that the Sustainable Business Park, the roads, building out the gas, the sewer lines, all of that infrastructure. First, to locate the South Kent transfer station on that land, but then also to begin still looking at who are these other partners and who else would come to the table to help us with diversion goals. If you recall, the very first master plan that we did for this Sustainable Business Park that included larger compost operators, it included other businesses that have a piece of the puzzle to play in this. So while it's not the Kent County Bioenergy Facility, we know that with the transfer station, we'll be bringing MSW to that location and then can continue some of those conversations with private partners. Again, the Board of Public Works would set that tipping fee in October of 2026, and then every year sort of moving forward. Part of the new governance structure that we discussed is that we would form a new technical committee. This would be made up of haulers and the environmental community and other stakeholders that would help the Board of Public Works by really doing the technical analysis of different proposals, and then the Board of Public Works maintains its role as a policy governance board. And then really based on the materials management plan and other work, we would then decide in roughly 2027, where are some of those pre-processing opportunities? How do we start to bring those online at these different sites? And then eventually in 2030, you have the closure of South Kent landfill, and you begin to go into the post-closure of that. But you maintain that there will be a disposal option in Southern Kent County. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Al to quickly kind of talk again about how we got here.
I think it's interesting that all of us, including myself, tend to measure an issue from the beginning of it from when we got involved with it. And so when it was announced that I was coming back to Kent County, I had a lot of calls, emails, texts from local unit officials in Kent County because I've known many of them for decades, cities, townships. And they were not shy about telling me what they thought Kent County needed to do. And probably the one I heard the most was the issue of the sustainable business park and where the county was going. And so after I started back and I became aware that there were public works meetings where we had major community leaders who were yelling at each other, and there was a lot of stress and a lot of anger at these meetings. So I just started asking questions. I started asking questions of some of our top leaders in the community about their understanding of the project. And I found that there was a huge gap in understanding of some very basic facts about what the county Department of Public Works was intending to do with the Sustainable Business Park project. And so I basically brought a group together, the stakeholder advisory group, and you can see on the slide, convened a group that included county representation, both myself and from the board. We had Metro 6, townships, City of Rockford representing cities outside of the Metro 6. We had the Right Place, Grand Rapids Public Works. We had Chamber of Commerce. So we really tried to cover a lot of, and haulers. And so we tried to cover the major stakeholders that, would have opinions regarding this project. And we met every other week for about 2 years straight. And we did a deep dive into details, a really deep dive into details, and really, I think, covered very well we looked at what are the alternatives, could you expand the waste energy facility, what might that look like versus the status quo. We did have extensive discussions about flow control, countywide rate equity, policy and governance, market risk, consumer, business, and capital costs, financial modeling, and basically came to the conclusion. I won't say that we had a unanimous vote where everybody said, yeah, do that, but we certainly had a consensus to move forward with what we now call Sustainable Business Park 1.0, because as we all know, that imploded, and so everybody put their heads back together and came up with 2.0, which basically would still accomplish some of the long-term goals of not creating another landfill. And I'd like to go back to that, because as I look at leadership, I see two time frames that are important. One is 40 years ago, when basically the county decided that, this will be our last landfill. And I think one of the other Vern Ayler's quotes was, "I hope a county board never has to cite a landfill again in Kent County." And so our policy from that time was centered around that. And so some fruits of that policy were the WTE. And the WT alone has saved a landfill from being located in Kent County during its life. And I think Steve or Dar showed the projection that it would save another 3 million tons of waste between now and its anticipated closure in 2039 or 2040. And so in a way, we have a board now, and I look at myself starting back 3 years and 3 months ago. In January, we'll have 5 new commissioners. 2 years ago, we had 8 new commissioners. I'm told maybe the 2 years before that was another 5, and then some folks were appointed midterm, so another 5. So you think of that, and it's easy to say, whoa, this is moving too fast. Why are you jamming this down my throat? But on the other hand, it's part of a 40-year vision to put waste to better use and to reduce the amount that goes in the ground. And then the other timeline I think of is from 2015 to now. Because in 2015, everyone got together and said, whoa, we have 2 deadlines that are looming. One is the landfill's going to last until about 2030. We need to do something because it could take 6, 7, 8 years to go through the permitting and planning to bring on another landfill. And so we need to figure this out. And of course, we heard firsthand the unhappiness of the Metro 6 about being the only ones paying for the flow control, because over the same timeline of the WTE, we have townships that have just bloomed. I mean, we have townships that are bigger than some of the cities. We have a 30,000 population township. And so from the city perspective, it's like, you know, we're paying all of this because back then we had the population, but today we're not the only ones with the population. So not only do we think this is unfair, but we are unwilling to sign an agreement moving forward after the end of 2025. So, county, you have until the end of 2025 to figure this out. And they've been adamant about that. I think you could talk to any of the cities and I think you'll hear the same thing. I know you'll hear the same thing. And so that is a real deadline that if we reach it and don't have an agreement, Plan B doesn't look very good. And there isn't really a Plan B because ultimately what happens is we can't guarantee the amount of waste that goes to the waste to energy facility. And really that gets us to a point where we're really operating suboptimally and threatening the future of that facility. I think too, truly the landfill 2030 seems like a long time away, but the time goes so fast that it'll be here before we know it. And really, our decision line isn't 2030, our decision line is now. Because if our intention is to do another landfill, then that's something we need to do right now. We need to get going, we need to get planning. That will reverse 40 years of Kent County policy on what we think is right for the future. And I should say too that surveying the DPW did indicate that over 80% of our residents don't want to see another landfill in Kent County. So I think that matches the policy approach that the county has taken for the last 40 years. So I guess I just wanted to reiterate that I don't think do nothing is a legitimate approach. I don't think the world will continue as it is if we do nothing. I think that the agreement will run out with the 6 cities next year, and then we have a problem on our hands. And I also think that if we fail to make a firm decision on, yes, we are going to landfill, then let's move forward, let's start the permitting, let's make sure we have the land and everything lined up, that all has to happen soon. And so I just wanted to let you know that my opinion is really in the wheelhouse of we can't put this off. Really, when you look at 2015 being the more recent beginning of a concerted effort to look ahead and say, wow, 2025, our agreement runs out with the cities, 2030, our landfill's done. We're kind of at the tail end of that 10 years of planning and preparing for what to do. And so really now is kind of the time where decisions do need to be made. So, and I also wanted to mention that the future is happening around us. I was really stunned. So the chamber has hosted a number of meetings with haulers. I've attended those. Others from the county have attended those. And the last one was a couple months ago, and it just hit me how empty the room was. And basically in 5 years, we have had 14 haulers bought out. So what was an environment of great choice for the consumer, because there were so many companies doing this work. I'm sure you'll resonate some with the list, so I'll read it real quick. But in the last 5 years, Bob's Disposal, Red Creek, Potluck Pickup, Everkept, Green Valley, Wise Disposal, MCM Disposal, Holloway, Advanced Disposal, Stirk Disposal, B&B Pickup, Blue Water, Logjam, and Junket with Josh, not this Josh, have all been bought out. And so, we are moving towards a world where I think we'll have probably 2 or 3 really large haulers, and I think we have to also very carefully think about what that world looks like if the county isn't a participant in it. It certainly won't be a wide choice of many haulers. There will be a choice of probably 2 or 3 when all the buyouts are done, and I'm not sure what impact that will have on the market. So I think that, the choice before the commission soon will be, do we evolve what we've been doing for 40 years, or do we dissolve what we've been doing for 40 years? And I think that that is truly the issue before us. I think that there are a number of implications. Say we demobilize the whole effort. I think there's a number of serious implications. I'm going to pass that back. I don't remember if it was Dar or Steve that were going to directly address that, but I'd be happy to answer questions when we're done. And with that, I'll pass it back to Dar.
When Al became administrator, he never thought trash would be what it is. But it is a big deal. So want to talk briefly about governance, and then we'll circle back on some of those other comments. One of the things that the committee formulated and our Board of Public Works looked at, and we've been hearing for years from the Metro 6 in particular, and frankly from the larger townships, is that they'd like to see a broader representation on the board. And I don't disagree. In fact, I agree. One of the things that I've always stated is we want the Kent County Department of Public Works to be everyone's DPW, at least in this space. So the recommendation, we have a 7-member board today that was put in place in 1969, I believe, by the Board of Commissioners at that time. The Board of Commissioners still appoints, it still goes through the same appointment process. But we would actually have a little different representation. The road commissioner would no longer serve. That's really a legacy from a time of the early 60s when the road commission was our governing board. We would also have one less county commissioner, and in that place we would still have 4 county commissioners. Then we would have a representative from a municipality of plus 30,000, one minus 30,000. And then by state statute, the way that we're formed, the drain commissioner would continue in his or her role on the board. So it would continue to be 7, just a little different in terms of the representation. The county would still maintain its majority because at the end of the day, we have the fiduciary responsibility for all these assets and the decisions made about them. But we also have a much broader voice of future decisions around the Public Works Department. The Technical Advisory Committee would be appointed by the Board of Public Works, and as Steve mentioned, it's going to be a group of haulers, environmental interest, and others to really boots on the ground. How do we want this to look, and what facilities would we recommend in the future, and where should they be placed, and all those things that can flow to the Board of Public Works for consideration. And then with the ending of the contracts with the 6 cities, the Metro 6, the Waste Advisory Board that was a part of those contracts would dissolve with the technical committee stepping in its place. So the question really is, do we evolve or do we dissolve? Our department, its history, the staff that work there, the direction that we've looked at, the 90 by 30, a more recent perspective on how do we continue to move forward with diversion. We've built an integrated system by choice, it was very intentional. It was intentional in that waste to energy, the recycling facility, North Kent Transfer, South Kent Landfill, they all work together. They work together because of the financial strength that the county has and the department has around all of these operations. But as I mentioned, the South Kent landfill and the revenue that it generates has supported the entirety of the operation for many years. And if we make a decision to turn off the landfill here in Kent County and not build another one, that revenue does not exist in the future. And so how do you balance out the need for an integrated system where you're providing and solving to diversion absent of those revenues? And that's really the question that we're looking at today. The other issue is that if we just build another landfill and absent flow control or the mechanisms that ensure that waste is going to flow to the facilities that the county designates so that we can make better decisions about diversion, waste to energy will not stand up. In fact, the recycling facility will not stand up. And then there's a cascade effect where the North Kent Transfer Station doesn't stand up, and the entire integrated system will not continue as it looks today. So a decision around flow control and the decision the county wants to make around diversion and the investments that we've made across the county in these facilities really depends on the decisions of this board over the next few weeks. To give you some idea of what the stranded asset value would be, the appraised value of the waste energy facility stands at about $160 million, and we'll be completing about $45 million in refurbishment that will be completed in 2026. The original cost to buy the property, to construct and build our recycling facility, and all the improvements that we placed there in the last 10 years, 14 years, excuse me, is $19.5 million. The North Kent Transfer Station and all the investments that we've made to serve the northern part of the county is $17 million. So what does that mean if we strand those assets? The waste energy facility does not, we asked a national consultant to come in to take a look at what would those properties be valued at. And so the waste energy facility, given the current political and regulatory climate, and the fact that we don't believe the city of Grand Rapids would want us to bring trash in from outside our community. Right, we could run that facility and get trash from Detroit or wherever, but that's not our intent. Our department was, the Kent County Refuse Disposal System was developed, was actually put into place to solve to the Kent County needs and solutions for Kent County. The Recycling Education Center as it stands probably has a worth of $7 million, but that's mainly the property and the building, because even the equipment that's there, the infrastructure is 14 years old. Yes, we've been replacing equipment, but that's pennies on the dollars when you're trying to unbolt it and move it to another facility. Our North Kent Transfer Station, because it's located on the North Kent landfill property that carries liability with it, probably has a value somewhere in the $11 million range. And the property that I mentioned that the last 3 directors have been buying for future landfill development, our basis in that property is roughly $5 million. So we're going to go from a significant amount of invested public dollars in these facilities to a situation where the value on the exit side is much less significant. And one thing we didn't put up there, but to negotiate a 20-year power purchase agreement with Consumers Energy was a 5-year process. I won't get into all those details, but there's also a penalty in there that if we step away from that agreement, we're paying Consumers Energy $1.4 million to do that, because they agreed to take our energy for 20 years. We had to agree to be able to deliver it, and that was considered appropriate and fair.
John, let me take this last one, because this is something the stakeholder group spent some time on. And because the question has been asked, well, what if we sold the whole thing? What would that look like? Dar talked about what the assets are worth, what the likely value in a sale would be. So as we looked at that, privatizing the whole system, so what did we learn as we looked at other communities? So obviously, solid waste collection and disposal will continue. It has to. I mean, it's a basic part of our life. However, given the distance to area landfills, more transfer stations would likely be required, probably in Kent County and more in the urban core, and more in the eastern and southern areas of the county. It's likely that the patchwork of local municipal contracts and agreements for recycling that would replace the county system would be more difficult to conform to the new MMP legislation. We would create a situation where we wouldn't have a disposal neutral market. I mean, smaller haulers without landfills wouldn't be able to compete, really. And like I said before, we're rapidly moving to a world where there's 2 or 3 bigs, and I think ultimately, without the county's involvement, certainly the 2 private haulers that have their own landfills will be, I think, really in the driver's seat as you look to the future. And I think that ultimately, should that all turn out that way, you would have 2 companies that would own nearly 100% of the disposal capacity for Kent County. Markets with limited competition generally experience greater price increases. I mean, there isn't the competition to balance out the need to compete with a whole number of different entities. And also the costs with the new transfer stations and processing infrastructure could very well result in higher tipping fees for residents and businesses than what we're actually talking about today with the approach that's being recommended. The other thing I think that's key is that Kent County will still be responsible to manage closed landfills. And I didn't mention it, but I think one of the other reasons why we would like to follow that 40-year thinking of not creating another landfill is that, a lot of people think, well, you create a landfill, 30 years later you close it and you're done. It really is considered to be a 90-year decision to create a landfill. So it's an issue our great-grandchildren will ultimately be wrestling with unless some brilliant new technology arises to decontaminate landfills. But certainly, we have 3 of them right now. We're soon to have 4 that we're responsible for forever. And that doesn't seem to me to be a great legacy to continue to leave to our descendants. So we have the decision timelines. So we have had meetings with a number of stakeholder groups. We had meetings with township supervisors. We also had meetings with Metro 6 leaders. We've had also meetings with haulers. We've been to committee, board, and so we're really on the cusp right now of moving forward with LHR, finance, and the board to make this decision and move forward. So that's kind of where we're at in a nutshell today. And I know we'd be happy to do our best to answer any questions or get information as needed.
All right, I think that was the cue to open it up for questions. Questions from commissioners? Commissioner Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm trying to get my arms around this, obviously with 40 years of history, and we're planning for 40 years in the future, and I'm not even 2 years on this board. I've never been in the trash business, so I'm trying to get my arms around all this, but I'm really struggling with a lot of pieces of this proposal. And so, I think more so just big picture philosophically, I think I'm having issues. And I know this is a unique commodity with a lot of history, so it's not just a free market kind of thing out there. So I'm trying to sort through it. But one of the things that I struggle with is we have a proposal before us, but I haven't really seen a lot of other options. I think as you go to solve a problem, and Al's been doing public policy problem solving for decades, I feel like we ought to have kind of a string of options. One, you start with a very minimal that we would be required to do and what that would look like. And then you move through, getting a little bit more involved, do a little bit more. And then I think what we have before us kind of is a full-throated, all-encompassing, all-in kind of proposal. But I feel like there should be some other options for us to consider. I mean, I really struggle with this rate equity. I mean, I feel like what initiated this whole thing, I think, is the expiration of the contract with the 6 cities. I mean, isn't that what's kind of
It's
initiated?
two things. It's that and the end of the landfill.
And the end of the landfill,
Yeah.
okay. But it's probably good to have a comprehensive discussion on what to do with our trash long-term. But that, to me, is what precipitated kind of this whole conversation, and with the expiration at the end of next year. And I feel like the cities are kind of, holding us hostage a little bit, especially for those of us who I represent a lot of rural part of this county. We have a diverse county. We have very urban, very suburban, and very rural areas. And we've almost always respected that. And I feel like this proposal is not respecting the diversity. I mean, the haulers that pick up in my area, I mean, we'd have to consider there's more labor costs because it just takes longer to pick up in rural areas. There's more equipment costs. I mean, the trucks and fuel and all that. So it's more costly to pick up in a rural area than it is in an urban area. And so I feel like with a rate equity proposal, we're not taking into consideration the diversity of this county. And so I have just a lot of reservations about that. I mean, I've looked at, kicking around, can we exempt rural areas from the flow control? I mean, we have a lot of small townships and villages and even small cities. And maybe we should look at exempting the smaller ones from this conversation and then look at, okay, who are we including and what would that look like? The waste to energy, I don't know if there's any proposal to look at what it would look like just to solve that problem. You have to have, 200 or 250,000 tons annually to make the waste energy facility work. And you're bringing in way more than that now with the mandated 6 cities. Well, what does it look like if it's just the city of Grand Rapids is mandated to bring in all of the city of Grand Rapids waste into that facility? Probably won't be quite enough, but then others would probably, just because it's close by, Kentwood and Wyoming, they may just bring it anyhow. I mean, so I'd be curious, a minimalist solution, what would that look like as well? I guess there's a lot more, but maybe I'll just stop at that. Or last thing I'll say is more of a comment. I mean, we pride ourselves as a county with public-private partnerships. I don't know how involved the industry has been with this. I know they have some concerns about it as well. I mean, I hope we would work with them, try to come up with, come to the table, come up with some solutions that they feel more comfortable with as well before we bring something before this board to consider. So, there's kind of a lot there to unpack, but just wanted to try to get some of my reservations out from what I've tried to learn and talk to folks and pick up over the course of the last months.
Let me start and say that I think that we should send you the stakeholder report. That did have a number of options that were looked at, but options that were from the starting point we're at, and not as if we're starting from scratch, because we have these things. And so it was more like, what do we do going forward since we do own these things? So the options would be limited by the fact that we're in a certain place, so we have to figure out what to do. But let me regenerate that, just so people can take another look at that, because we did spend a lot of time talking about different options, so. Darb, did you have anything you wanted to respond to here? Or?
A couple thoughts. I mean, it's a lot to unpack, but a couple of thoughts if I could. I would agree that there's a lot of moving pieces and it seems complex, and in many ways it is. The equity,
It is.
it is complex. I mean, yeah, we've learned that, right? There's a lot of moving parts. There's a couple of, I think there's a comparison that I might offer, and that is, one of the challenges that you have in this space is no matter where you live as a resident, as soon as you've placed something in the trash and decided that it no longer has value, you've created a community problem that we have to solve too, whether it goes to private disposal or public disposal. We established a system over 50 years ago to provide a public solution. The other comparison that I would offer is that I think, given the maturity in the market here in West Michigan, in the industry for waste hauling and disposal, to me, a parallel example would be, let's just use the city of Grand Rapids, their wastewater district for water and wastewater. There's not 5 different water lines going down the street, because efficiency and delivery would suggest there ought to be one of each, one water, one sewer. Does it limit choice? You could say so, but I think in the public perspective of waste is really more of a utility than it is anything else, because of the implications of disposal. That might be something to consider when you look at it. On the rate equity side, I agree, and I think the industry would agree, that if you're operating on the outskirts where you don't have the route density and the driveways aren't as close together and you don't have as many customers, it will cost more. It will continue to cost more. Because in our model, when you tip, it's always the same price. But if the hauler needs to drive further, or the truck, or whatever it is on that side of the equation, that's reflected in the bill that's charged to the customer. One last thought, and that is around, is there something else? Our department used a national consultant. We did a request for information, reviewed that over the course of, I think, almost 2 years, and then we went to a full request for proposal. We asked, and we had responses from across the country and really across the world, including Spain and other countries and companies that said, here's our solution. The solutions that were uncovered were really 3 things. So you do mixed waste processing, so you're diverting and sorting. You do waste to energy, or really you landfill. And the solutions that we then moved to based on our history was, well, let's look at diversion and what does that look like. So we did basically an international request for proposal to ask the best, the brightest, the emerging companies and technologies, how would you solve to this in the future? And we based our decisions based on what they told us. And that's the approach that we've taken.
And I do think, to Commissioner Hildenbrandt's point, we do on the northern tier and the eastern tier have townships that are fairly tiny that very well could qualify for an exemption. I think that, we've talked about that. I think that does make sense.
Okay, Commissioner DeBoer.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question, and then I had a comment. What has been the feedback from the township supervisors on this plan?
You want to pick that up, or you want me to pick it up?
You start, I'll finish.
I would say it's mixed. I would say there's township supervisors in the more urban areas that recognize that those urban areas are now more part of the challenge. And there's township supervisors in the more rural areas who are like, our residents have a burn barrel out back, and we're really not part of the problem. So I would say both.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. I mean, we had 2 different supervisors that participated on the stakeholder group. And I would say the first one that participated would say didn't like the solution. I think understood that something needed to be done, but didn't like the solution. I think the second one that participated was likely more open to the solution. But I haven't heard like a united front in opposition. I think that once we sat down and once people went through and learned what was happening, I think they understood that something had to be done. And then it's what solution can people agree on. almost at some level, as many people as you have, as many solutions sometimes. So it's kind of trying to figure out how to chart that course and then find something to stick with and get it done.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And then, as I look back over some of our history, I think of North Kent Sewer Authority and that problem that we had. And to me, the way that they approached that problem, and it was more local, it was the townships coming together and solving a problem for the community. I really appreciated that method, and instead of us doing something to solve the problem that may not be representative of all of the areas in the county, I would have preferred to see what the private industry and what the township supervisors and those stakeholders coming together and providing an alternative solution or just various different ideas and go from there rather than us trying to solve it for everyone else, as I feel like that oftentimes can not represent what the community needs are.
I think that's a really good point, and I think that we have been very open to alternative solutions throughout this entire process. And the most common thing I hear is, it's a problem, I understand it, and then I don't like this, there's gotta be a better way. However, then when you ask further, well, what is it, what will you suggest? We don't get suggestions. I mean, we simply don't, and part of that is after 10 years of work and all the work that's gone into this, I think where we landed was something that works, will work, but certainly I think that we have not had folks who don't like the idea haven't had the solution to suggest. Other than there's gotta be a better way, or we think we should, do some global thing like privatize the whole thing, or I've heard comments like that. But as far as, a solution that we can dig into as a legitimate alternative, I have not heard that.
Sure.
Thank you, Chair. Have we pursued some of that avenues as far as taking in and saying this is, I think of the Child Care Task Force. We know it's a problem, right? And it's a collaboration of a lot of different representatives in the community and some in government and the private sector, philanthropic community. Have we tasked them at trying to solve this problem? Or have we tasked the community at trying to solve the problem rather than us trying to solve it for everyone else?
No, I don't think so. I think that, and I wasn't here in 2015 when this started, but I do think that because the DPW is the owner of the assets, that they started from a position of needing to solve a problem. Now, they had many debates at their meetings, public meetings, and then of course with the stakeholder group, we specifically reached out to those that had a stake in the outcome of all this to get advice and to do a joint educational process where we could all learn and hopefully agree or disagree, at least all have the same facts, was kind of the goal we started with, and to take the temperature down from a lot of the emotion that was out there 3 years ago. So I would say that not exactly what you're saying, but certainly not engaging with others. There's been a lot of engagement with others.
Commissioner Bujak.
Thank you, Chair. Dar, Steve, Al, I just want to thank you for all of your effort to educate all the commissioners on this issue. I know more about trash today than I ever wanted to know in my whole life. And I think the pivotal moment for me was being out on the 108th Street trash dump and standing there watching the trucks tip and feeling the ground shake with all the equipment that was out there. And at that point, I think I decided that, another landfill just didn't make sense. To continue this madness just didn't make sense. And so the solution that has been put before us as commissioners has been the Sustainable Business Park 1.0, which we all know didn't work out. And now we're looking at Sustainable Business Park 2.0. And all along, I felt that was like the solution that we were being guided to. Choose one, no, that's not going to work. Now you need to choose two. And today was the very first time that I've heard in our discussions two things. Al said, do nothing, which when I was a young man, my father always told me that don't forget, when you are making decisions, doing nothing is always a choice. So today Al, made mention of doing nothing and what the consequences of doing nothing would be. So I don't know that doing nothing is an option. And then the other thing that I saw in today's presentation was dissolution, I think was the word, dissolving.
Dissolving.
And that's the first time that I've seen or heard that option put before us as commissioners. And I guess my question after all that is, what would happen if the commissioners decide to, as a group, not support the flow control ordinance and it fails? What is the outcome? Is that decision gonna send us into a tailspin and send this whole thing towards privatization? I just want to understand what the implications of that monumental decision-making would be so we can kind of move forward with that understanding. Thank you.
Yeah, likely all three of us will want to answer that because we all bring different perspective. My best understanding, given 30 years in the industry and being the director for the last 10 and having had a chance to speak with each of the former directors and look at all this, if we don't move forward with a larger flow control type decision, I know that I think we have forecasted that we're then in a death spiral, that our waste energy facility will not be able to stand up as it does today. We'll have to raise rates drives waste away, or we have to go outside the community to find the waste at a higher rate, and that brings its own problems. We will no longer have revenue from the North Kent or from the South Kent landfill because that will be closing in 2030. That means that we'll have to raise rates at the recycling center. We can't support that without establishing a market rate for what it costs to process that. And then I don't know how you support the North Kent transfer station. So my advice would be decide to get out of the business soon, quickly might be 5 years, as opposed to death by 1,000 cuts. Because to allow these facilities where we made all these investments, the Board of Public Works has to make a decision to turn off those investments and start turning out the lights. The other perspective that I would offer, and I think I've said it before, is that if you look at any other county around us and pick the name, and you ask and you look at the infrastructure that they have to manage municipal solid waste, it's landfill. It's landfill. They don't have a recycling facility, or they have a small one that really doesn't meet the need of the entire community. They don't have the transfer stations where we will be able to densify polystyrene. We accept recyclables at no cost. We are able to take organics. We can pull the propane tanks out. We can take the tires for recycling. We recycle corrugated cardboard. We recycle vinyl siding and shingles and. That doesn't exist, to my best understanding. And the investments in the diversion infrastructure does not exist in the private sector at any scale to meet the need. So that's kind of how I look at it. So if you want to get a sense of what it looks like in the future, just look at the counties around us, subtract our department out of it, and go, that's what you'll have in the future.
All right. Yep, go ahead. Sure.
A couple other questions popped up. The $65 a ton, if I don't support a countywide flow control, but the proposal before us is that with a $65 a ton rate, how did that amount get decided upon? And why isn't it something different? Why isn't it $55 a ton? And I did read, I think, that it generates, at the $65 a ton, it generates more money than is needed to run the system. So I guess two-part question: how did the $65 per ton get decided upon? Is there proposals where it could be something less? And how much more money is generated than is needed, and what is going to be used with those revenues?
I'll start with the big picture and then turn it over to Dar for more of the detail. But I think part of the goal in designing 2.0 was to avoid the $80 million bond that we were talking about with 1.0, because we knew that wasn't very popular with commissioners. So the idea was, how can we accomplish the same overarching goals without the bond? And so the other way to do it, which we've done, you know, when you look at the last 3 facilities that we've had opening ceremonies for, the Parks headquarters, the North Complex, and the motor pool, the fleet building, they were all done with cash. So in essence, the county saved up in a strategic capital fund and paid cash for those facilities. We're really talking about the same approach here, is that by setting the rate higher than what we actually need for operations at the moment, we can basically put that money into like a strategic fund and pay for the pieces that we're going to need, like a transfer station at the Sustainable Business Park South, for an anaerobic digester to hook into someday. And so we can build some of the pieces with cash by having the higher rate, instead of asking you in 5 years for a bond to build, at least a full bond to build a new facility like that. So that's part of the goal, to defray or eliminate the necessity to bond for the facilities that will be necessary to carry out the goal of creating the sustainable business park.
Can I interject an objection? Question assumes facts, not in evidence. I don't know that a decision has been made to set it at 65.
It has not.
Yeah.
It's
It's a concept, yeah.
I mean,
If we prove, the resolution before us will not be to set that number. That still goes back to the DPW.
If I could speak to that?
Yeah.
Sure. Totally agree with that. There was 2 ways of thinking about it, and Dale mentioned one of them, and how that's played out for our department in the last, 5 years. We were able to build our Safe Chem and administrative offices without having to bond. We were able to build our North Kent transfer station without having to bond. We built our recycling facility in 2010, and we're still paying off the bond. So I think the other way to look at it is that if we could set the rate lower, and we certainly can and likely will. We wanted to pick the high side so that we were being very open about what it could be. But if you set the rate at 60, for example, I believe 60 still covers the entire cost of our operations, stands up waste to energy, ensures that the recycling center continues to operate, and actually reduces the rate from $70 down to $30 at the recycling center, because it incentivizes and makes that cost as low as possible, short of being free. The flip side of that, as to what Ale spoke to, is that then when the Board of Public Works makes a decision from year to year, or they're looking at a 5-year capital plan, they have to set the rate at that time to take on any debt service that we would have to assume. We took on debt to build waste energy. We took on debt to build the recycling center, something that we can do and know how to do and will do. But you can set the rate less now and then adjust it as you move forward.
I think, too, that, good point, Mr. Chair, but I think that hopefully as part of all this, we coalesce on what 2.0 is and an agreement that that's the way forward. So in my mind, what that does, it reinforces that we're not going to build another landfill. It reinforces ultimately the flow control, which I know there's disagreement on. Also, I think, DPW was in negotiations with 4 companies that would have built a facility in the Sustainable Business Park, and then contracted to take different areas of the waste, like number 2 plastics or cardboard, or to actually then make a commercially viable product that they could sell. And that was the 4th leg of the stool. So bury, burn, recycle were the 3, and then adding a commercialization leg. And really, the state grants that you got for infrastructure are tied into kind of setting that up for that to happen. And what's the total on those?
9 million.
So $9 million still kind of hangs in the balance of funds that are available to build that infrastructure. And as part of 2.0, I guess, my understanding is that that infrastructure would be built with those grants.
Correct.
Again, setting the future stage to carry out the rest of it, and one day being set up with a transfer station to find that anaerobic digester partner that could then come in and kind of fulfill the 2.0 project. So again, I understand there isn't an approved 2.0 out there yet, but I would hope that as part of this process, we get there, that it isn't just flow control as a kind of a separate floating piece to all this, but that we see where it ties in as far as the future 2.0 or wherever we land.
I guess my clarification was whether it's 65 or whether it's 63 or 64.25, that decision hasn't been made yet. That's
Oh,
still,
correct.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we're probably well past our time, but just a couple of questions. You mentioned at some point there are your experts say there's three basic directions for processing this waste. There is diversion, waste to energy, or landfilling. We do diversion, we do waste to energy, and we do some landfilling. Waste to energy, we're the last ones in the state to do it, am I right?
Correct.
And we don't have a useful life much beyond 15 years, and we don't have allowed life beyond 15 years.
Correct.
Okay, so that's not the future of this process. Am I right?
Not long-term, not beyond that.
It's a
15-year
short term,
window.
but it's not a long term.
It's a transition point.
So that leaves us diversion or landfilling. We've been the leader in this county for at least 40 years in moving us towards diversion strategies. For us to continue to move towards diversion as the end game for this, is there an effective way of doing it without countywide flow control at this point?
I don't see one.
Okay. So if we don't have countywide flow control, and that's a decision this board will have to make. If this board makes a decision, no, that's a decision. I don't know whether that's no decision or status quo. I hear you saying there is no status quo. If we can't do it, if we don't approve it, we will unwind, either controlled unwind, or it'll just happen to us.
That's correct, yes.
And if it unwinds, what's the direction? Is the community going to effectively land in landfilling? I was going to say land in the dump, but that's probably not the way to say it. But that's the direction by default where we head.
I believe that's true based on what we're seeing in all the other counties around us.
So if we're not going to do diversion, we're not going to do the process for that, why would we want to do another landfill? The private companies already have landfills. Why not just let them do the landfilling? Or is that what you're saying we would do?
Well, if we have our own landfill, we generate revenue to support the system.
I got it, but we don't have a system anymore in this
We don't.
hypothetical.
No, there would be
Our
no-
landfill is going to fill up in 5 years, and it takes 7 years to get a new one, if we could get a new one. Why would we get a new one? Why not just default to the public, private industries?
That would be our recommendation, that we would default.
And the winner, and the,
I'm sorry?
Still have legacy costs?
Yes.
We still have legacy costs. Yeah, we have 4 landfills that we have continued to manage.
and what's the cost of that legacy cost annually?
Uh,
If you don't have a system to back you up,
Kim, is it? How much? See, that's why we ask her. We spend about $2.5 million annually to manage the closed landfills. We'll be adding a 4th one here in 5 years. And I know that our unfunded liability as of the end of '23 is $6.5 million in the account that we manage closed landfills with.
so if we don't have a system to contribute to that cost, we either have to collect that in our surcharge,
Yes,
assuming we can still do it. Your attorney left already, but.
I did
um,
confer with him, yes.
Okay. So we either have to collect it from the surcharge, or we have to get it out of general fund.
Correct. Yeah, I think our recommendation would be that if you wind the system down, that you would transfer the responsibility of that to the health department, and they would have to have a division or a group of probably 3 or 4 people full-time managing the closed landfill system, including the PFAS pretreatment and the funding behind that to make that happen.
So every consumer in this county that continues to produce trash will still have to pay us in addition to the private pays to the haulers.
That would be true.
Mr. Chair, the only other thing I'd mention is that the growth in our landfilling expense was triple since PFAS.
It certainly has increased. We're looking at proposals right now where the Board of Public Works, is there anyone, okay, I can say this because they're not here. No, they're going to, oh no, I'm sorry, Commissioner Burrow's here. We're going to be presenting an overview of our PFAS pretreatment solutions that we went out for proposal this year. I believe the capital outlay is between $8 and $14 million, depending on the decision of where to go. And then there's an ongoing CapEx or OpEx cost annually. So it's a big number.
If we unwind as well, so you took, what was it, about $230 million of public investment into this system. We can recover about 20 million as I added up the number. So what happens to the other 210 million? Is it just gone?
I would have to ask the accountant. I think it's gone. Is it gone, Kim? It's gone. The CPA says it's no, yeah, we lose that investment.
That's public investment that right now would support ongoing service
I think that's
through the diversion.
When we look at waste to energy, we know that it really only has salvage value because without an energy contract with Consumers Energy, it has no value. Without a feedstock, it has no value. Without flow control or guarantee, there's no industry that would buy that facility and take the risk to operate it if they don't have fuel to operate it. And then it's the question, does Kent County want waste coming from, you pick the community, outside of Kent County, being combusted in West Michigan, in Kent County, at that facility? We think the answer is no, based on the feedback that we've received thus far.
So for me, bottom line is if we don't want our communities tied to landfilling for the next few generations, is there any alternative other than to establish a solid countywide system?
I believe the only alternative is a countywide system
Supported by flow control.
supported by flow control.
Okay. Gee, I seem like a lawyer.
That's a nice cross.
Yes, go ahead.
Stan, so obviously, I'm not sure, my trash bills have always been an invoice I looked at in my monthly budgets and said I can't afford it, right? I mean, we're not talking, I think, large dollars, at least for our consumers. I think majority, I think everybody but two of us here are currently under flow control now, and not by our own doing, but again, doing some things better from the environment, not burying trash. I mean, I think sometimes doing the right thing comes with a price, and this is common among Republicans and Democrats. I believe people are willing to pay more to be better, especially when it comes to our trash. So I think we just got to remind ourselves that, though it'll increase some folks' bills, some outlying or outside the flow control area, it'll also reduce some folks' bills inside the flow control area that we're currently at. But we also have so many other things. This is just the first step of many. I love the idea of paying cash for our facilities. This is a slow roll of again, 1.0, right? This is just a slow roll. I think we're going to have other partners that are going to come in. I think our communities can do different things as well. I mean, my whole, again, I've learned a lot about trash the last 2 years, probably more than I ever thought I was going to learn.
Why does everyone say that? Everyone's like, I didn't want to learn it, but now I know
Yes.
it. It makes us feel really good on this side.
I'm going to blame Commissioner Ponstein because his work schedule didn't allow him to be on the DPW board, so I'm going to throw him under the bus. But anyways, I have learned a lot. I'm glad I've been on that board. Obviously, I've talked to both Steve and Dar. I mean, one of my goals long-term is that we get to single cart use. I think that's important. I think this helps potentially with that. It's one step, but we need these facilities built. Again, in my side conversations with Steve over the years, I think it's been, all right, how do we accomplish that, accomplish single cart? And some of these things have to take place. And single cart is you're throwing all of your items in and we're still sorting and we're almost recycling, then almost 100%, pretty close to it. That allows one trash truck to be on the road, better for the environment, better for the roads, better for a lot of things. And our communities can still do things, and that's city councils, township boards can go to, and bid this out with different haulers in different geographic areas of their community. So it doesn't have to, again, try not to mess with the free enterprise, but they could potentially have 4 different bids within their cities for different trash haulers to get prices down as well. So I think there's a lot of things that are there. Again, I'm not an expert in all of those things, but again, I think being better is going to come at a price, and this is the first step, and it's going to cost a little more in the meantime, but it's, I think, a good first step, and we'll have partners. People are going to come along with us on this, is what I've learned over the last, a couple years on the DPW. So again, one went out. Again, we're going to find some other users. I think that's what everyone's goal here is. So anyways, it's not necessarily easy. It's challenging, and I think, we're slow rolling this in the right direction. It's going to take time. And I think if there's a buyer for our facilities now, we'd have it also in 3 or 5 years if we had this built out. And I don't see where those options would go away. I think Lowell obviously is a potential as well as with another transfer station. So again, as our community gets bigger, I think our expectations with doing the right thing with trash also increases as well.
All right. We have to do public comment yet. I don't know if
I have a question, just request for more information. We always hear about diversion. How much diversion is already occurring in the private sector? I know the store that I work for, everything used to go in the trash. We separate out metal, cardboard, plastic, and you name it. And it's taken away. It's not being taken away by a trash hauler. It goes to Kent County.
Right. We don't have a measure of that because, again, it's source separated by the business or by that person, and it's going to a scrapper or wherever they've contracted to send it. We're not in that space, so we can't measure it. And I don't think the state has a good idea. Do they, Steve? I mean, you've been along.
But you've got an end receiver of it. I mean, they're in business because they're making money.
They are, but they don't report out. They're not required to, right? It's a commodity, and so we really focus on once it's in the trash can, right? Once it's considered trash, that's where we start.
And that's unfortunate because most of the trash and the recycling stuff, the best way to address it is when it's packaged. And that's not county government or state government is going to control that. It's going to be the private sector. And I know the firm that I work for is very aggressive in all those areas.
All right. We have to do some public comment here. Anyone here is from the public wish to address the board on this issue?
I am. I will be quick. I'm Tom Mahoney. I'm a Kent County resident and general manager for Republic Services. So I started my notes this morning with good morning. Obviously, we're beyond that, and I appreciate everybody sticking around. So I will be really quick. We've had a lot of great discussion, so I appreciate the board discussing and thinking through things. I'll try and cut down some of the things that have already been talked about, but I will say that Republic Services is supportive of what the 80% of the Kent County residents have asked for, which is to not build another landfill in Kent County. We do believe that there's a need for it. We believe there's enough capacity in the market without Kent County needing to build a landfill or a transfer station anywhere within the county. We do believe that the material management process that we are going to be working through, the planning committee, as part of 115, that the industry and the rest of the committee members that were chosen should have the ability to help identify areas for increasing diversion within the county. I don't believe that flow control and diversion are wholly associated. It is true that flow control results in residences and businesses in the 6 cities paying higher disposal, but that doesn't mean that flow controlling the entire county is going to change diversion. It just means everyone's going to be paying more money until we figure out what the best way to manage the waste in the county is, and that's what the Material Management Planning Committee is meant for. So I would just ask that the commission delay when flow control comes about, if it comes about in a couple weeks, until the Material Management Planning Committee has a chance to meet. We haven't even had our first meeting. And then I also ask that you just wait until all options are considered. Everything vetted, which for the first time I've heard today, the county saying maybe we shouldn't be in the industry at all. Take a look at that, see what that, do an RFI. The RFI that was done was for building off the existing assets of the county, and how do we, work with Sustainable Business Park 1.0. I just ask that you take a look at maybe a 2.0 that includes an RFI of just what if we weren't in the industry at all, and what would that look like, and how can we increase diversion at that time? Thank you very much. Appreciate you guys sticking around today. Have a great day.
Thank you. Anyone else? If not, miscellaneous? If no miscellaneous, thank you guys that are still here. Appreciate it. We are adjourned.